So in my last video, I talked about selective silencing in American sports, and now there's an even clearer example, but this time at the Olympics. Hi, all. I'm Dr. Zainab Hashim. I'm an applied social and community psychologist, and let's become culture together. So in case you missed it, a Swiss Olympic commentator is facing calls for removal, and it's not for being wrong, but it's for pointing out that the IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee, isn't applying its own rules consistently. So let me give you some context. For these 2026 Winter Olympics, the IOC banned Russia and Belarus from competing under their national flags because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Belarus's support of Russia. But they're allowing individual athletes from those countries to compete as what's called individual neutral athletes, and only if they meet specific criteria. No military ties, and no support for the war, whether on social media or otherwise. Okay, and these rules were strictly enforced, with athletes subjected to strict multi-stage background checks. Okay, now here's the thing. The Israeli bobsled team is competing under the Israeli flag with zero restrictions. Their pilot, AJ Edelman, has described himself as Zionist to the core and openly supports the war in Gaza. And it's not just that. Most of the team members of the Israeli bobsled team have served in the IDF, which is obviously direct military ties, right? And they have also actively supported the war on social media. So by the IOC's own eligibility criteria, the exact same criteria they apply to Russia and Belarus, this team should not be eligible to compete, at least not under their national flag, right? Except they are. And again, under their national flag, with no restrictions whatsoever. And here's what makes the IOC selective enforcement even more stark. The UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry found that Israel has committed and is continuing to commit genocide in Gaza. Multiple international institutions have also documented this, and I've published peer-reviewed research on this in addition to other scholars. Meanwhile, Russia's invasion of Ukraine involves documented war crimes and crimes against humanity. Some nations recognize it as a genocide, but there's less international consensus on that designation. Okay, so the IOC is strictly enforcing rules against athletes from a country that is committing war crimes, but not enforcing those same rules against athletes from a country where the UN has found them to be committing genocide. The double standard could not be clearer. Okay, and so this brings us back to Stefan Renna, a Swiss Olympic commentator who pointed out this inconsistency during his coverage of the bobsled competition. He cited the IOC's own eligibility criteria and asked why there are different standards for Israel versus Russia. It's a legitimate question. Okay, and now some people might say that commentators should only talk about the sport itself. But sports commentators regularly provide context about athletes, their backgrounds, and the politics surrounding events. That's part of sports journalism. Okay, and Renna was doing what sports journalists do. He was providing relevant context about IOC eligibility rules and asking a legitimate question about their application. And afterwards, the Israeli embassy publicly condemned him. They accused Renna of fabricating facts and spreading slander. They demanded an apology and discipline for Renna. But here's the thing. Everything he said was factual. Edelman's social media posts are public. The team member's IDF service is documented. The IOC's rules are published. So the embassy is calling verifiable facts misinformation. And then RTS, which is Renna's employer, removed the segment from their website. Okay, they released a statement saying that while the information was factual, the statement was inappropriate due to its length. What that actually means is that we know it's true, but we're caving to pressure. Okay, and now Renna is facing calls for his removal. This is exactly how silencing mechanisms work. You state verifiable facts, you get publicly condemned by a powerful entity, your employer backs down, and then you face consequences for telling the truth. And everyone else watching learns the lesson, don't speak up. Now, Renna had questioned why Russian athletes who support Putin's war were being allowed to compete under their national flag, people likely would have applauded him. They would have called it brave journalism. But he questioned Israeli athletes who support Netanyahu's war. And now his job is on the line. Do you see the double standard there? The system works because it makes most people calculate, is speaking up worth my career? And understandably so, most people say no. But some people look at what's happening and decide the cost of silence is higher. And that's what Renna did. He pointed out the inconsistency in IOC's enforcement, and now he's facing the loss of his livelihood. This isn't about truth or accuracy. It's about which perspectives are allowed to exist and which ones are too costly to express. Pay attention to who can speak freely and who faces consequences for speaking. That pattern tells you everything.